Welcome to the Distinguished Visitors Series at the King's College. I'm delighted today to have with us at the college a wonderful Renaissance man, Bill Edgar. Bill Edgar is an ordained minister, a musicologist, and a jazz musician. He has written many articles, including those on cultural apologetics, the music of Brahms, who's one of my favorite 19th century musicians, and African American life. Books include works on apologetics, such as The Face of Truth, Lifting the Veil, and Reasons of the Heart, Recovering Christian Persuasion, as well as at least one book, if not more, on taking note of music.
In my sophomore year at Harvard, where I was an undergraduate, I had a professor who was a Christian, and he took an interest in me, and I was fascinated by what he was teaching. And after about a year of getting to be friends, he strongly suggested that I go over to Switzerland. We were going anyway, and if I did, to connect with a friend of his named Francis Schaeffer. He didn't tell me anything more, just his friend, and you'd be interested in getting to know him. So my brother and I were on a bicycle trip. This is in 1964, and he wanted to come back to the States, and I wanted to stay longer, so I pulled out this little slip of paper, Francis A. Schaeffer, and there was the phone number. Called them up, and they urged me to stay for several days, and I thought, this is really amazing hospitality. And then when I got there, I realized it was a Christian community with a very, very strong emphasis on cultural apologetics. Yeah. So in a conversation one Sunday morning with Dr. Schaeffer, everything changed for me. And
how long did you stay there?
Well, I ended up staying the rest of the summer, but then I was...
That's hospitality.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if people still talk about L'Abri or Francis Schaeffer, but it was, and is, because it's still going on, a community where you can go as a student or as what they call a helper. In both cases, it's virtually free. And you work physically for 4 hours a day, and then you study for 4 more hours. And in those days, it was the dawn of the tape recorder. You said I was a Renaissance man. I'm not that old, but I'm old enough that I can remember these reel-to-reel tape recorders clicking away in the L'Abri study place. So we would study, and then there were seminars and long meals with Dr. Schaeffer at the head and talking about things. So, and I ended up becoming a very close friend of his and going back, particularly since my parents lived right down the lake in Geneva, as often as possible. We invited him to Harvard also to speak, and he gave electrifying lectures at Harvard. So if you've been brought up to think that the Ivy Leagues are godless places, yeah, there's a lot of godlessness there, but God is very much alive and well in places like Harvard, and that's how I met the Lord. It's remarkable. And today, much more Christianity there than I believe I can remember from my own day. Yeah, the misguided expression, full-time Christian service, usually means I'm going into the ministry. But all of our lives, in whatever domain they might be, should be full-time Christian service because we serve God. And so my process was I was intending to go into the field of musicology. My chops weren't really good enough to be sure I could be a good performing professional and put bread on the table from that. And I loved scholarship, I loved history, so that was my intention. So I thought I would maybe go to seminary first just to get more theology. And then I looked around for where I should be called, and the thing that occurred to most of my trusted friends was teaching. So I went to Greenwich, Connecticut, and taught in a boys' day school, secular school, but very congenial. And I taught philosophy, French, and music. And so they were 10 of the best years of our lives because we love high school young people. And I was able, as a high school teacher, to bring the gospel into my teaching material, as well as we had a fellowship in our home attached to a national movement called Focus. Fellowship of Christians in Universities and Schools, which is a kind of young life movement for high schools, but focusing on independent schools. So we were very active in, you're right, it's both and, because we had direct ministry opportunities with these fellowships, and then the more involvement with my disciplines. And then, I'm probably telling you more than you want to know, but the very kind headmaster of the school thought it would encourage me if I could go to graduate school in music. So I signed up right here at Columbia and studied ethnomusicology, which is music in relation to culture, and I focused on West African music there. And that was absolutely wonderful. So that, if it was a transition, it was a almost seamless one from what I majored in to what I ended up doing as a teacher.
Right.
As Raymond Williams said, culture is one of the 2 or 3 most complicated and difficult words in the English language. It has a long history to it. To make things incredibly simple, and way too simple, you can tie the term culture into cultivation. And if you look at Genesis and you see the account given of God's call to humanity at the dawn of history, culture is an integral part of what we're meant to be doing. If you look at it broadly, what we call the cultural mandate of Genesis 1:28 and following says that as image bearers of God, we then are to go out, populate the earth, replenish it, and subdue it. And in the subduing, it's a gentle lordship, not a harsh violation. But in the subduing of the world, we're doing culture. There's a lot more things you could say about that. But culture is not just the arts or, ballet. I'm always disturbed when you read a newspaper and the headlines are big political events, and then you go further in and there's something about economics and business, and then towards the end you have culture and the arts. My view is that everything is culture, that what we do, we are cultural beings because of that first mandate. And despite the fall, it has not been abrogated, it's been redefined in Christ, in his Great Commission.